Hello, my cyber students. Welcome to video number 4, the cell membrane. I told you that this was going to have its own video, so let's get right to it. No fluff, just right to the notes. Okay, the first thing we need to do is to discuss everything we need to know about the cell membrane before we start answering and practicing questions. So this slide is from video number 3, specifically on the cell membrane. Now, let's remember what the cell membrane is. The cell membrane is a structure that's part of the animal cell. And here what you see is a picture of the animal cell. And the cell membrane is the outermost layer, what number 4 is pointing to, the outermost layer of the animal cell. Okay? And it's all around, guys. It's all around. It's the entire outermost layer of the cell. Now, what does it do? What is its function? It allows certain molecules to enter or leave the cell, regulates what moves in and out of the cell. We also say that it's selectively permeable, okay? Meaning that things can move through it. So let's zoom in on the plasma membrane. So remember, if you're looking at the cell, you know that the cell membrane is the outermost layer of the animal cell. Now, we're going to zoom right in. Take a look at this little cross section here. I'm taking a little piece of this cell membrane and I am magnifying it 100 times, right? Maybe might be even more. This is what you'll see. This structure right here. This is called the fluid mosaic model. And we are going to break this down, what it is, what all these hot dog bun looking things are, and potato looking things. And then we are going to move further on the different types of ways molecules move through. Okay. So this is a little tiny piece cross section of the cell membrane. Let's start with the layers. You see how there are 2 layers here? This is called the phospholipid bilayer. Do you know what lipids are? Do you remember this from class? Lipids are fats. It's like a fat molecule. And let's take one of these many little guys that you see here, okay? So when you take just one of what's making up this double layer, this phospholipid bilayer, bi means 2, you have a head and you have the tails. Yes, teachers who are watching, yes, my AP students, there's much more to it. But again, we are focusing only on what we need to know for the living environment exam. Okay, so I know some of you are like, it's hydrophobic, it's hydrophilic, you're missing this, you're missing that. It's not asked on the test. But it is important for you to know the basics and to know what is it made up of. So we have this phospholipid bilayer, which is composed of these structures here. And this is the head. And these are the tails. And there are 2 layers, and that's why we call it the phospholipid bilayer. They are in constant motion, constantly moving. They're never still, which is why it's called the fluid mosaic model. Okay? Next, let's take a look at these large structures here. Okay, so let's take a look at these structures. These structures right here are called protein channels. Okay, they're called protein channels. These protein channels, and I'm going to make a channel right in the middle, help molecules pass through the cell. Whenever you're looking at this fluid mosaic model, know that the top is the outside of the cell and the bottom is the inside of the cell. And you'll have a better picture of this in a second. Okay, here we have this very interesting structure, and this structure is cholesterol lodged inside as part of the makeup of this phospholipid bilayer of the cell membrane. Here we have this Y-shaped looking object protruding from the cell membrane. This is called a carbohydrate chain. It can be given different names, but it depends on also the model that you're looking at, but this can also act as a receptor molecule. Okay? And that's all you really need to know. Now let me just erase and go through it one more time on labeling this fluid mosaic model, which is the cell membrane. This right here is called the phospholipid bilayer. These objects are called protein channels. Let's label 1, protein channels. I erased my carbohydrate chain. But this Y-shaped looking structure is a carbohydrate chain. And it could also be a receptor molecule. And we're going to talk about receptor molecules in a future video, of course. All right, guys, so now that we know and labeled this cell membrane, the fluid mosaic model, let's move on to understand what it is and how do molecules flow through the cell membrane. So if you were to take this and look at it as the entire cell membrane, this is what it would look like. Now, this is not drawn to scale, remember. This area would be the outside of the cell. In here is the inside of the cell. And of course, this is where inside of the cell is where you have all of your organelles. But this is really what the cell membrane looks like. Here you have the phospholipid bilayer. And of course, cells are surrounded by water and they have water on the inside. And we know that, we always hear this, we're made up of like 60 to 70% of water. I don't know the accurate number, but it's pretty high. Make sure you drink your water. But the inside and outside of a cell is surrounded by water. Now, I just drew some organelles to give you a better perspective and triple check that you understand that this is truly how your cell membrane looks like. Now, it might not be this thick in terms of ratios. It might be a lot thinner, but this is how your cell membrane looks like. The phospholipid bilayer, that 2-layer. And on the inside here, we have our cytoplasm, we have the mitochondria, we have the nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulums, the ribosome, and all other organelles. Remember, this is not drawn to scale. So now let's talk about how do molecules go from the outside to the inside of the cell and from the inside to the outside of the cell. Let's talk about diffusion. Diffusion is a word you need to remember, and we will also have a future video when we get to the lab section of this series. Diffusion is the movement of molecules across the cell membrane from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. And I want to emphasize that the molecules are moving from high to low. This is also called passive transport. Okay, so let's take a look at a Regents depiction of this. First of all, let's break down what we're looking at. We have here something. What is this? This is the cell membrane. Do you remember what we also call the cell membrane? The plasma membrane. Always remember that. Okay? So we have our cell membrane here. We know that this is the outermost layer of a cell. This is just a little section that we're looking at. We have an arrow. This arrow is very important when you are asked, where do the molecules move? You need to know where these molecules are moving. We can't take this test on a computer where they can do an animation. We're taking this test on a black and white piece of paper. So this arrow is telling you where these cells are moving. Remember that the top of this is outside of the cell. And in here on the bottom is the inside of the cell. So according to this arrow, these molecules that you see here, this could be water, this could be oxygen, okay? These molecules are going from the outside, okay, to the inside. From the outside to the inside. Again, how do you know they're moving that way? Because the arrow is pointing this way. So this is going to go here. This is going to go here. Because that is what the arrow is telling us in terms of movement. Now, we said diffusion is the movement of molecules across the cell membrane from areas of high concentration to low concentration. You can see very clearly that there are a lot more molecules here outside of the cell than there are inside of the cell. Here we can only see 3. Here there's a bunch of them. So this picture is showing us diffusion. It's molecules moving from high concentration to low concentration. This is a high concentration of molecules. This is a low concentration of molecules. Now I'm going to draw something on the side that is also speaking of diffusion. So if I have here my cell membrane, right? Their tails. Of course, they have 2 tails, right? But just for time's sake. And I have an arrow going the opposite way, right? And I have my molecules here. And I have my molecules here. Let me actually change the color of my molecules. You see how this is still diffusion? It's an area of high concentration, a lot of molecules moving to a little concentration of molecules, low concentration, high to low. So even though the arrow is going a different way from this one, it's still saying that these molecules are going from high to low. And that is diffusion. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about facilitated diffusion. Facilitated diffusion, molecules moving across the cell membrane from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration through a protein channel. Okay? Now, let's take a look at what the Regents is showing us. This again is a picture from a Regents question, and it is showing us facilitated transport. Hold on, this is a little too thick. This is facilitated transport. But this is still diffusion, ladies and gentlemen. Notice how you have a lot of molecules outside of the cell, very little molecules inside of the cell, but the arrow is pointing this way. It's going from high concentration to low concentration. That is diffusion. But the reason why it's facilitated transport is because it is getting the help of this protein channel, what we labeled before. And there is a hole in here that lets these molecules pass through and get to the inside of the cell. So this is called facilitated diffusion, when molecules go from high concentration to low concentration. It's being helped, facilitated through this protein channel. Awesome. Let's move on. Here we have what's called active transport. Okay? Active transport, molecules moving across the cell membrane from areas of low concentration to high concentration through a protein channel. ATP energy is used in this process. Now, there's a lot going on here. So I'm going to highlight some key words here to help you remember. Let's use yellow. So active transport, let's use a deeper yellow because the background's already kind of yellow. We know that it's molecules moving across the cell membrane. We know that. That's what we're studying here. But it's going from low concentration to high, which is the opposite of diffusion. It's going through a protein channel. And because you're going from something very low to something very high, you need energy. You need ATP energy, because we know that this is what's being made in a cell. This is why it's important to watch my videos in sequence, okay? Because you needed to watch video 3 in order to fully understand this video 4. So let's take a look at what this looks like as a picture. So here again, we have the cell membrane, we have a shriveled up protein channel, and we have our molecules going from low to high. Well, Ms. T, how do you know it's going from low to high? The arrow. The arrow is pointing that the flow is going in this direction, from the outside of the cell to the inside of the cell. Okay? We know that this is the inside. All right? That's how we know that this is active transport. So you go from low concentration to high concentration. This is like overstuffing a teddy bear. This is already a high level. There's a lot of molecules here. A lot. And we want these molecules to also join the party. So you got to push them in there. You got to push them through the protein channel. And that push, that you need energy for that. So you need ATP energy to make this happen. Okay? So that is active transport. The movement of molecules across the cell membrane or plasma membrane, same thing, from areas of low concentration to areas of high concentration using ATP energy. Another type of transport that we're going to bump into when we do the lab section series videos is the osmosis. Osmosis is the diffusion of water across the cell membrane. So it's the exact same thing that I spoke about in terms of diffusion, high concentration to low concentration, but this is specifically talking about water. So the diffusion of water across the cell membrane. Notice that the definition of osmosis is much shorter because that's it. You're an expert. You already know what diffusion is. Diffusion is the movement of molecules across the cell membrane from high concentration to low. So that whole definition is within diffusion. But the thing with osmosis is that we are only speaking of water. Water, water, water. All right, guys. It's time. This is my absolute favorite part because I love when you start understanding and getting it. It just makes me so happy, like I feel it. So let's practice some Regents questions. And I left it in this format so that you guys can start familiarizing yourselves with the way the test is going to look like. Now, the only thing that kind of sucks about the test is that they don't arrange questions together in terms of topic. You might have a question about the cells here, and then about evolution here, and then about cloning here. So they group questions together when they're the same, but when you're looking at multiple choice, they are all so different. So now that you're an expert on the cell membrane, are you ready? It would be awesome for you to pause before I explain and go over the question. Now remember, you should always annotate. And you should all annotate, meaning mark it, highlight it, circle. And you should understand the question and understand the picture. So looking at number 1, if you would have never, ever, ever studied this test, you wouldn't know what this is. If you would have studied, taken the class, you wouldn't know. But now you know that this is the cell membrane. And this is the cell membrane. And this is the cell membrane, and so on and so on. You are now experts of that, ladies and gentlemen. Let's read the question here. Base your answer to the following question on the diagram below, which represents the fluid mosaic model of a cell membrane. Let's take a look. The arrow pointing to a compound of the membrane component of the membrane that is best described as before you even look at the questions. Remember what we said this is? We said these were protein channels. So let's see. The arrow is right here, is pointing to the protein channel. Is it a sugar floating lipid? No, it's not this. Let me change this to my red pen. It's not sugar. A protein floating in lipids. Now we know that these guys are lipids. This is the phospholipid bilayer. So that is a lipid. B is correct. Let's keep going. Lipid floating in proteins? No, they're saying that it's the opposite, which is not true. They're saying that this is a fat, a lipid, and that it's floating in proteins. No, that is incorrect. Lipid floating in sugars? No. The best answer, the protein is floating in lipid. Number 2. The diagram below represents the fluid mosaic model of a plasma membrane. What do letters X and Y indicate? Okay, we have X pointing to the protein channels. We have Y pointing to the phospholipid, fat lipid bilayer. Let's see. Let's start eliminating as we see you see how they all have X here? Let's see if they're correct. X is pointing to protein channels, so it's not, let me change back to that hot red, not lipid. They're not pores. And they're not nuclei. Well, that was easy. But let's check and see if C is even correct. X indicates proteins, that's right, and Y indicates lipids. That's beautiful, that's correct. It's C, guys, it's C. That was easy to us because we know now. All right, let's take a look at number 3. In the diagram of the plasma membrane shown below, which structures are indicated by letters A and B? Again. And again, I suggest at this point, pause the video, do the question yourself, and then play it to check and see if you're correct. A is pointing to protein, the protein channels. B is pointing to the lipids. So this is wrong because A is not fat, it's a lipid. I'm sorry, it's a protein. A is, nope. Nope, that was easy. That was easy because A is a protein channel and B is pointing to the lipids. So 3 is A. Number 4, you're getting the hang of this, right? Number 4, the diagram below represents a section of the plasma membrane. This is why it's always important for you to read the directions. Because if you read the directions, it tells you what the picture is most of the time. Okay. What does structure X represent? Structure X represents these phospholipid bilayer. So it's not a protein. It's not glucose. It's not glycogen. It is a protein. I'm sorry, a lipid. So 4 is lipid. All right. Beautiful job. Let's move on to the next. Let's do number 5. This is going to get a lot faster. Which cell structure is represented by the 3-dimensional diagram? This is the plasma membrane. How dare you ask us such an easy question? Okay, this is a high-level question, guys. High-level question. So this has to do with the movement of molecules, and we're going to do a lot more. If you don't get this one, it's okay, because we have a whole lab to discuss diffusion through a membrane. And I'm sure that sounds familiar to you, but let's read and see if we can do this together. The diagram below represents the distribution of some molecules inside and outside of a cell over time. Excuse me. Which factor prevented the protein molecules from moving out of the cell? So which factor prevented a protein molecule from moving out of the cell? It's funny how they put this picture here, but the question doesn't necessarily, the picture doesn't necessarily help you answer the question. This is more of remembering. When we do the diffusion through a membrane lab, you're going to learn that it's about the size. If the molecule is too large to pass through, it will not pass through, no matter what. It won't pass through a protein channel. It won't pass through the mosaic model, the phospholipid bilayer. It just won't do it because it's too large in size. If it's small enough, it can go through. So size is an important factor as to why these molecules are able to pass through the membrane. Okay, let's do number 7. The electron microscope has revealed that the cell membrane is composed of layers of... So this is asking about what are the layers made up of? What are the phospholipid bilayers made up of? So they're talking about the cell membrane. Okay? You got this. Don't let these questions trick you or make you feel like they're asking about something else. Don't overthink. They're made of a phospholipid bilayer and proteins. They seem to really emphasize on just those two things. So let's take a look. Lipid protein, nope. Lipid protein, nope. Lipid protein, nope. Lipid protein, yes. The answer is D. This will never change. All right, just showing you that we don't have much left, just in case you're getting restless. Again, with my videos, guys, take breaks, but only if you know you're coming back. If you take the break and you don't come back, please come back, because you need to do this practice and you need to finish the videos to fully be equipped for this particular topic. And this is a big one. I will be honest when it's not usually asked. I'll be honest when it's mostly asked. And this is a big topic. Let's continue. Number 8. Let's remember to pause the video. Try the question yourself first. The fluid mosaic model of the cell membrane suggests that the membrane is primarily composed of proteins and lipids. Moving on. You're an expert. Remember that. The primary excretory structure of paramecium, amoeba, and hydra is the cell membrane. Let's move on to number 11. Number 10 didn't really have much to do with cell membrane, did it? Okay, 11. Which structure is most directly responsible for maintaining homeostasis in cells? Now, remember, I'm always going to throw this word at you. Remember that homeostasis is keeping a stable internal environment. Keeping it stable, keeping it balanced, equilibrium. Equilibrium. Okay. Again, which structure is most directly responsible for maintaining equilibrium, stability in cells? That is absolutely the cell membrane. Number 12. In the human body, oxygen is absorbed by lungs and nutrients are absorbed by the small intestine. In a single-celled organism, this absorption directly involves the cell membrane. The cell membrane in our little friend, the amoeba here, the cell membrane is what absorbs or releases in a one-celled organism. 13, the cell membrane is to the cell as, so it's one of those questions. The cell membrane is to the cell as the ocean is to the earth. Nope. The atmosphere is to earth. This sounds good because the atmosphere is the outermost gas layer of Earth. A house to the earth? Nope. A forest is to the earth? Nope. The best answer here is B. Let's do this last one together. Okay. And I'll post a separate video just for short responses, or the short responses are going to take place in the in the video that involves diffusion through a membrane lab. That is where you're going to get the bulk of short response questions of the cell membrane. So there might not be a part 2. There might just be a continuation of this when we do the lab. All right, let's do number 14. Cell membranes are said to be selectively permeable. Which statement best explains what selectively permeable means? Let's see A. And let's change this to a highlighter. The cell membrane prevents any harmful substances from entering the cell. Nope, that is not correct. The cell membrane lets certain substances enter the cell and keeps certain substances out of the cell. Now, that is the perfect answer so far, but let's keep going. The cell membrane allows only large molecules to diffuse. Nope, this is incorrect. It doesn't just allow large molecules. If anything, large molecules might not be able to go through. The cell membrane has pores that let only water and glucose into the cell and carbon dioxide out. This is incorrect. There's so many things entering and leaving, and it's not just those 3 things. Okay, so the best answer is B. Ladies and gentlemen, please subscribe. Okay, subscribe, because when you subscribe, you will get notified of when I post the next video. Share my videos with whoever needs this, that you know that they're taking the living environment exam. After this, we'll be moving on to video number 5, the plant cell.